Hello and welcome to my presentation for EDN462 for assignment 3. My name is Jessica Sainsbury and I'm currently in my third year studying towards a Bachelor in Early Childhood and Primary Education, and my student number is 3294425. So just an introduction to my child. So I've used a pseudonym for privacy reasons, so I'll be calling her Mia, and she's 5 years and currently in pre-primary in school. So the mathematical focus that I've chose to work on for the 3 learning activities for this assignment would be sorting and classifying. So from the previous diagnosis of this child's learning that we did in assignment 2, I picked up that she really engaged and loved to sort different objects. So this is the reason why I have chose this to focus on, which then I want to try enhance it and see the capabilities and what knowledge she knows of how well she can sort different objects. So through this, she will be able to sort different things according to their size, the colour, shapes and different classifications. So also she'll be demonstrating 2 curriculum standards, which would be from the patterns and algebra, where she's able to sort and classify familiar objects and then explain the basis of these classifications. And then as well, because I use shapes during the activities, so she'll be able to use from the shape standard as well, where she's able to sort, describe and name familiar 2-dimensional shapes and 3-dimensional objects in the environment. And then there's just a list of learning activity 1, 2 and 3. So for learning experience 1 is identifying and sorting different shapes. So the provocation context for this one, so I've used resources that were used from Maya's bedroom. So just all the stuff that she likes to play with in day-to-day activities. So there's different shapes and like hair luckies and rings and stuff in there. So this activity required Maya to be hands-on. So from the box that I've put just random stuff in, she needed to sort them according to their shape. So there was circles, triangles, squares and rectangles, and she needed to group all the circles together, triangles, squares and rectangles as well. So she needed to look at the different classifications of these objects so she could sort them correctly. I felt that she was very challenged through this box as well. As I've created a worksheet here. So after she's had sorted her piles, she needed to count how many were in her pile out loud for me, and then colour in on the graph the little activity sheet that I made up of how many were in each pile. So for the focus questions and interactions with the child, so I've put here questions that were asked, what the child had said, and then conversation that I thought was significant and important. So I won't go all through it because you can just read it off the screen, but just a couple of questions that I'd asked to Maya. So I clearly had stated there, is there any more circles in the box? So I've clearly identified what the shape is called, so then she can look at the shape that I've given her and then see if there's any more of those. So she looks at the different classifications of that shape. And then at the bottom here I've got what's the difference between a square and a rectangle. So previously to this we had talked about the different sides of the shapes, and we had seen that the square and the rectangle have the exact same side, so the same amount, so they both have 4, but she was able to distinguish that a square is smaller and that a rectangle is long. So she was able to even identify that a square has 4 equal sides where the rectangle doesn't. Just a couple of things that she had stated. So she had stated that there were 2 circles stuck together. So again, she's able to identify that it was a circle. And also, again, the square has 4 sides, and that's the same as a rectangle. And then there's the conversation that I thought was really important, which is just, again, how we talk about why the square is short and the rectangle is long, and how we need to identify them, the differences. So just an activity reflection. So I thought that Maya did really well in this activity. She found it very easy. So from the picture that I've provided on the side here, you can see that she's sorted the shapes accordingly to their correct classifications and what they look like. So she's put them all very similar in the pile, and she's even distinguished the squares and the rectangles as well. So if I was to change this activity, I would maybe group things So group things that are very similar. So maybe you're not distinguishing such differences like the circles and the squares. So maybe using objects from her bedroom where like the squares and the rectangles look very similar, where she has to really deepen and look at the different classifications and really search to group them differently so that they're all the same. So for learning experience 2, I've named it Sharing Cherries. So the provocation context, so I've just made a little worksheet up here. So it's got 2 ice creams and just an empty jar there, and I've used just different coloured pom-poms. So got her to pick out the colour that she wanted to use. She picked pink and then had stated that they were cherries that she was going to put into the ice creams. So again, she was able to use imagination there. So for this activity, she was required to evenly sort and share the cherries onto the ice cream so that they were all the same and they were even. So I've used all even numbers for the cherries. Didn't want to use odd numbers just yet, just to confuse her, but so she was required to share the cherries evenly between the 2 ice creams to make sure that they were the exact same. So I've demonstrated to Maya first of how we could do this. We started with small numbers first, so we started with 2s, then 4s, 6, 8, 10, and then 12. So we stopped at 12. So we'll keep moving on. So focus questions and interactions with the child again. So it's just the exact same thing as the last time. So the questions that were asked, what their child said, and then the conversation that I thought was important. The conversation I think is really important for this one because it demonstrates how she had done it. So I'm going to go through that one first. So I've physically got her to state how many cherries do we have in the jar. So she's able to distinguish how many we have first before she can share them and just keep going. So she's stated the number that we have. So I got her to count them by herself or out loud together. And then the way that she had done it, I've got it here. So she said, I have a 1 here, a 1 here, then I have a 2 there, a 2 there, and then they both have 2. And then I got her to reinforce and count how many cherries were on the ice creams to make sure that she was correct. And then so things that the child had said, so she said that the pom-poms are pink, so she's distinguishing the colour, and then she also used from the last activity where she said they look like a circle, so she's reinforcing from one activity to another. And then she also had stated that there was little squares on the ice cream cones as well. So just an activity reflection, this one went really good. So in the picture that's shown there, so that was with 12 cherries, so, and she was able to really do that really easy. She found that quite easy to do, so she did this one really confidently. If I was to change this activity, I would maybe add more ice creams in, so maybe starting with like 3 and then we can add another one, so going 4, 5, 6, and then also experience with odd numbers and see how they go with that and what happens if there isn't enough, or if one ice cream has too many, and just adding larger amounts of pom-poms as well. So for learning experience 3, we said what's inside the magic box. And so for the provocation context, so I've used again Maya's toys that were used in her bedroom. I felt like that she connected well with the resources that she was already familiar with, so this is why I've used these resources. So in this box, again, it's kind of similar to the first activity, but I've just added a couple more things in that are a little bit harder where she can't distinguish such a shape as such. So this was activity, she was required to sort the shapes according to small and big. So it already challenged her enough because the objects were already quite small. There was no big difference between one was really big and one was really small. So that kind of challenged her, I felt, a little bit. So again, for the focus questions and interactions with the child, I have quite a bigger conversation for this one, as I thought there was a lot more involved in this activity. She went through different things that were tiny, small, big, and then different shapes that she was used. So again, she's reinforcing what she's learnt in the first activity with the shapes into this one. So questions that were asked, I've said there again, like, can you tell me what this shape is that we have previously looked at? So it's good to reinforce what they've what they have learnt before into another context. So just for them to keep remembering stuff like that. And then again, asking questions like, how many sides does it have? And then again, so do you know what shape it is? But that was really good, asking those questions for her just to get her thinking again. And then what the child had said, so she stated that this shape is a rectangle. It has 4 sides. This one is big, this one is tiny. And then she was able to count like on the rectangle as she counted the sides with her finger. So she counts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So from what the child had said from the first activity to the third activity, you can see that she's using more detailed words of how she describes the different shapes of what I've taught her. And for the activity reflection for this one, so with completing this one, she found this one a little bit harder than the other 2 that we had previously done. Again, she still got confused again with the triangles and the rectangles having the angle word in the end. There was a few, however, I thought would have been in maybe the bigger pile rather than the smaller pile that were kind of similar that she did group in the bigger pile. But she was on the right track for this. She can distinguish that this pile is small and this pile was big, so I got her to explain why she had grouped them the way that she did. Again, if I was to change this activity, I'd maybe go according to different properties, such as like looking at different classifications of like rough and smooth, different things like that. So looking at like maybe the circle has a smooth surface where the rectangles on here had a bumpy surface. So looking right, distinguishing at those classifications and properties of the different shapes, I think that would really really challenge the next child, as well as if they're harder shapes, so such as the toys that I've used in like the smaller pile, how they're not specifically a shape as such. So that would be really good to do. Where to from here? So from the 3 activities that I created for Mia, she has well and truly demonstrated that she's very good at sorting. As she engaged with the 2D shapes a lot, I feel like the next learning that she would need to focus on would be with 2D and 3D shapes. She interacted with 3D shapes, however, I never got her to physically state that, like, this is a cube, this is a cylinder, and so on. So maybe focusing on more 3D shapes would really take advantage for her. So that would be really good for her to what she knows of the knowledge of that. However, I don't know if she knows about that as such yet. Don't know if she's done that in school, but I think learning about the different classifications of shapes rather than the sorting aspect would really benefit her. And then obviously she's going to be showing the exact same curriculum standards, so with the shapes where she has to sort, describe, and name the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional shapes. Again, she'll have to use her sorting skills, so she'll be more than competent to do that. Just a self-reflection. So I've learnt many important factors from this fieldwork. I've learnt that it's important to keep the task short and straight to the point, as young children don't have a short attention span and can get very easily distracted. So it's always important to have a backup plan that will engage the children and interest them. So if you find that they're lacking in what you're trying to learn, maybe use resources that will engage them, or different like storylines or scenarios where they can actively engage. And then it is important that we are able to use intentional teaching practices, which will embrace and build on the child's strengths as well. So this will effectively assist a child's learning where they are able to actively engage in the different learning experiences that are suitable for their different interests. And then again, if the child is interested in the activity with the resources that are being used, they're going to have a longer attention span and engage within the learning context. Just references, and thank you for watching.